Hey everybody, today I am here on Liminal News with Laura Loomer, uh, who is renowned for her investigative journalism on behalf of the right, more or less, and has recently been spectacularly kind of deplatformed by Elon Musk and X or Twitter. And yeah, it's a fascinating to talk to Laura. We had our first chat yesterday, and of course, if you like this kind of content, please, like, subscribe, do all those kind of things. It'd be very helpful. And Laura, thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. I'm doing well, just waiting to see what's going to happen now in this digital hellscape we found ourselves living on X. So, just been kind of navigating this week ever since Christmas when I dared to challenge Elon Musk and his position on H-1B visas. And now I have, as you said, kind of found myself even more deplatformed than I was before. So,
Yeah.
just kind of been in a haze this last few days, I suppose, because it doesn't seem like there's any answers or any kind of recourse whatsoever. And it's just been a very eye-opening experience for me. And I think a lot of the MAGA movement and people who really thought that X was going to be a free speech haven.
Yeah, so let's back up a little bit because I think, you're now sort of, this may be the first time you've talked to, I don't want to call it spiritual left or something, but like whatever my community is, it's a different eclectic community, but maybe they don't know so much about you. So just tell us a little about who you are, maybe a little about your biography, your history, even if you want a little bit about your childhood. Like, how did you get to be the Laura Loomer that we see today?
Yeah, well, thanks for that. So, as you said, I'm an investigative journalist and an activist, and I got my career started with Project Veritas. And so I'm currently 31 years old, and I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. I went to boarding school, and after boarding school, I decided to go to a school called Mount Holyoke, and that was located in Massachusetts. It was a all women's liberal arts college, and then I quickly learned that it wasn't for me. I had a 4.0 GPA. I excelled academically in college, but I was more, interested in politics and more interested in broadcast media. And I didn't really enjoy living in Massachusetts much or, attending a women's college for that matter. So I quickly transferred. And at that point in time, I just didn't really care. I was just very disillusioned by the educational system in our country. And I thought that, all that mattered was really going to, a really kind of elite university. I don't know why I had that kind of ingrained in me from a young age, but when I was in boarding school, it was just that constant pressure of, oh, you're not going to amount to anything unless you actually go to the most prestigious school you can get into. And so I found myself feeling kind of depressed about it because I really had wanted to go to Dartmouth. I ended up getting waitlisted at Dartmouth and then, kind of went to Mount Holyoke because I thought, well, I guess it's like the next best school on the list. And so afterwards, I just transferred to a school that a lot of people hadn't really heard of before called Barry University down in Miami because I thought it really didn't matter where you went to school. It was kind of more of what you made of yourself. And so I quickly got into
And I guess you left Holyoke, you found very woke, and you sort of expected, I think Baxter was like a Catholic school, you said, so maybe you expected a different ambiance.
well, Barry University was a Catholic school, and I didn't really go there because it's Catholic. I ended up just getting a pretty hefty scholarship. And Mount Holyoke, was very expensive and very woke. And I found myself feeling very isolated. I wrote in my book how I literally had every single meal that I ate from breakfast, lunch, dinner, I ate alone because I just felt like I was not accepted because of my views. And I never felt that my views were extreme. I was just outspoken and, I was enthusiastic. And I found myself in a triple dormitory my first semester of college. And my roommates just, they didn't like me very much. And anytime that I would try to decorate my side of the room with either conservative political things or, I had any kind of like political branding in my room, I would find it either taken down or in the garbage. And I felt like my voice just wasn't heard. So I left and I moved to Miami and went to Barry University. And I became the president of the College Republicans. I was in the honors program there. And then I also, while I was taking 21 credits per semester, I also worked full time. And so I got a job working at the Fox affiliate. It's called WSVN Channel 7 down in Miami. And I would, take 21 credits, and then I would also work about 40 hours a week too. So it was just like a constant grind in school, trying to meet as many people in the Republican Party as possible. And that's how, from a very young age, I was able to be, so politically connected because I've been doing this for such a long time. There's a lot of people online who always say, oh, wow, I thought she was like 45 or 50 years old
Yeah.
because I've been making headlines, quite often and have really been at the center of controversy for the last 12 years of my life.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
no, I'm
I'm
31
curious.
years old. I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
got
very,
started
very
kind of
young.
young.
All right. And I'm curious, in your book, you talk about how even like the 9/11 was kind of a shaping event for you psychologically. Did you come from like a right-wing kind of Republican background, or was you
I
sort
would say my family's not hyper partisan. They're not super outspoken about politics, but they were conservative. I remember being a child of the war on terror, and so I was 8 years old. I wrote about this. My some of my first political experiences, of course, as a child, were Bill Clinton, the impeachment of Bill Clinton, and then also the 9/11 terrorist attacks. And so, uh, from a very young age, I became very, I guess you could say, interested and excited by news coverage, the coverage on the so-called war on terror. I developed an interest in Islam from a very young age. And so there's
Mhm.
a part of my book where I talk about how when a lot of kids were playing with Pokemon cards, I was playing with those Iraqi most wanted cards, I
Mhm.
believe, that were distributed by the United States government in an effort to assist with the war on terror, if you recall those
Yeah.
playing cards.
Yeah.
So,
One,
um,
one, one thing I liked in your book, by the way, was that you sort of made a distinction between your problems with maybe the tendency of Islam fanaticism and so on, but actually individuals from that faith who can be very good people and totally fine. Like it doesn't feel like you have like a personal animus or bias against people, who are Islamic.
yeah,
It's
I don't hate Muslims, but unfortunately for people who have heard about me or they're familiar with my story, the first thing that comes to mind is, oh, anti-Muslim activist or anti-Muslim bigot. And I don't really understand why they call me anti-Muslim. I've been very critical of Islam. I'm definitely anti-Islam, but you can be against an ideology without hating everybody who identifies as a Muslim. I find that just like there's a lot of people who, call themselves Jewish or they're Christian or, they call themselves Muslim. A lot of people identify because their families are Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and that's their upbringing, but they're not exactly like practicing themselves. And so I judge people on an individual basis, but because of my outspoken activism and the fact that the big tech social media companies have all completely deplatformed me over the last 7 years of my life, kind of making me the hamster in their digital extermination experiment, I guess you could say. A lot of people came to know me as like a white supremacist, even though I'm Jewish. They thought that I'm anti-Muslim, even though I'm not.
yeah. Well,
I was very critical of Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and, her immigration scandal, which I blew wide open before she was ever, elected as a member of Congress.
mm,
And instead of very much like what's happening now, right, instead of people actually like looking at the evidence and making an opinion for themselves, a lot of times what happens to me is I get labeled as a conspiracy theorist or a bigot or a racist. And then years later, people are like, oh, wow, this is what's happening. And it's like, well, yeah, I told you. I tried to tell you. I tried to warn you. And
yeah. Well,
my
let's
consequence has always been deplatforming.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit of that. Let's talk about, your past censorship. I mean, that's a big theme of the book, the Loomer book. Yeah, you've been censored by a lot of the tech platforms, as you described. Do you still feel that, yeah, maybe a little bit about how that happened and how it affected you, and also
Mhm.
how you feel about the people who run those platforms now? I mean, I was watching conversation you did yesterday, and you were like, these guys are all giving $1 million to Trump's inauguration, and he's taking it. I thought they were all going to go to jail, as Trump had promised. So, what are you feeling about that right now?
Well, I'm definitely not happy about it. Obviously, I'm a big Trump supporter. I've traveled with the president before. I don't work for President Trump. I'm a big admirer, a big supporter. I worked really hard to help get him elected. But I'm disappointed in the fact that a lot of these big tech social media executives who President Trump said really should go to prison, people like Mark Zuckerberg, of course, and he's criticized Jeff Bezos extensively. Now all these people are just being welcomed into Mar-a-Lago and it's almost like some kind of memo went out and they've, shown up with their $1 million checks and they're trying to buy influence. And I'd say it's very unfortunate because these people have persecuted and really honestly tried to ruin the lives of not just Donald Trump, but also his base and his supporters. If you recall, we're coming up tomorrow on the anniversary of January 6th. And if you recall, on January 6th, all of the big tech social media companies banded together and then they issued a joint statement on January 8th, 2 days after the protests at the Capitol, and they mass deplatformed President Trump. We saw that Amazon AWS completely deplatformed and, erased Parler from the App Store. And so I don't understand why these people who, in my opinion, have not just violated the First Amendment and, have deplatformed people and debanked people are being welcomed. But in my opinion, these people have committed serious civil rights violations because I don't view censorship as simply an issue of, simply an issue of, oh, you're violating somebody's First Amendment rights. I think that now it's become so extensive, and we're talking about debanking, and we're talking about banning people from food delivery
Right,
services,
but
and we're talking.
that all happened to you. Yes, you got debanked and you couldn't use Uber Eats and so on. What happened there?
Yeah, I got, well, that's another story. So in 2017, I used to live in New York actually, and this was the deciding factor that made me leave New York because I just couldn't take it anymore. I decided that I wanted to go to a Halloween party. And so I was headed to the city for a Halloween party. And when I got off the train, there were all these police cars everywhere and ambulances. And an ISIS terrorist had actually driven a car into a bike lane and killed about 8 people, injuring 12. And he was a driver for Uber, actually. And so I remember just kind of just feeling like I was in this very dystopian situation where people were dressed up in their costumes and they were walking around while bodies were littered on the floor and people were bleeding everywhere. And like the police had apprehended a guy that got out of his car with a gun and started, shouting Allahu Akbar and pledged allegiance to ISIS. And I was speaking out about it and talking about how dangerous it was for these rideshare companies to be hiring Islamic immigrant drivers, especially given the fact that about a month prior, on Rosh Hashanah, a friend of mine had been in an Uber, and the Uber driver, when he heard us talk at dinner, he started screaming at us, effing Jews, and told us to get out of his car. And we reported it to Uber and they didn't do anything about it. And so I had basically said the next day when I was going to go to Bill de Blasio's press conference that I was 30 minutes late to the press conference because it took me over half an hour to find a non-Islamic immigrant Uber, Lyft, or cab driver. And I was just trying to make a point. It was obviously very provocative and, some people found it to be offensive. But as a Jewish woman and as an American, it's kind of like three strikes against me when you're looking at this very supremacist ideology. They oppress women. They clearly have disdain and hatred for Jewish people and, animosity towards the West and the United States of America. I felt like somebody needed to talk about the fact that these companies were not doing background checks and they were hiring people who were not only throwing people out of moving vehicles because of their background and their religion, allowed to sign up to drive for a service and then utilize a vehicle to commit vehicular. So by the end, I found myself completely banned on Uber and Lyft. They didn't even tell me. They just issued a statement to NBC News. And then when I guess I tried ordering Uber Eats, a little while later. So this was like a month or two later. I had never used Uber Eats before. It wouldn't even let me order it. So I suppose when they banned me on Uber and Lyft, they also banned me on Uber Eats. But, people laughed and they said, oh, well, I don't like Laura Loomer because Laura Loomer's a bigot and Laura Loomer's a white nationalist and Laura Loomer's a white supremacist. And, every type of attack you can think of. But the reality is that the crocodile always eats you last, right? That's the mentality that so many people in our society have. And so it doesn't matter if it's me or a leftist or whoever it may be, the power that these companies have to shut somebody's payment processor down, to deny them the ability to get in a vehicle if they need to dude. These are very totalitarian, authoritarian actions that are being taken by a handful of very wealthy, right? These are very wealthy people in Silicon Valley. These are technocrat billionaires. And how much power do we really want these people to have? Especially now that you have people like Elon Musk, who's talking about making
Yeah.
X basically the WeChat of the West, where he wants to have it
Yeah.
be the everything app. So
Well, yeah,
we saw this week.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, so this must have been surprising. So you kind of finally found kind of like safe home on X or Twitter where you felt that you were protected by somebody who had really declared themselves supporting free speech. That must have felt like comforting in a way
Well,
that you had.
I was 5 years.
What's that?
I was banned on Twitter for about 5 years.
Yeah,
And
of
then when
course.
Elon bought the platform, I thought it was too good to be true. So I was always like very, very skeptical. And I had said, oh, there's no way that he's going to let everybody back on. And so then he decided to do a poll one day. And this was about 2 years ago. And he said that he wanted to grant amnesty to banned accounts. And so when they did a poll and they said, oh, should we grant amnesty to the banned accounts? I was one of those banned accounts. And I ended up getting my account back. So I wasn't, in the initial group of accounts that got their account back, but eventually I did. And so for me, it was an opportunity to rebuild, to feel like I had my voice back, to do my journalism again, because it was very difficult for me to do my journalism when I'm completely shut out from the public square. And so for years, it was just,
You've been using like Rumble and like Truth Social also, or not so much?
well, I hadn't really been using Rumble at that time, and I had been completely limited on YouTube. And then I had been using True Social, but I didn't feel that True Social had as big of a reach as X, right, or Facebook. And so I was grateful for True Social, and I was using True Social. But I mean, you just look at the numbers; it
Yeah.
doesn't have as big of a reach, and I still like it. I still use True Social. I'm grateful to President Trump for creating a free speech platform. But
Yeah.
there's far more people on X and
But
Facebook than True
but
Social.
I guess I'm sort of getting at is it must have been very surprising for you. Like you sort of rebuilt your presence on X and Twitter, and Elon had sort of said that he guaranteed like free speech and contradictory opinions and so on. And then all of a sudden, you kind of made some points around the visa situation, and like, yeah, what exactly happened? How did it all go down?
So it was Christmas, and I have my notifications set for President Trump on True Social. And I got a notification from President Trump's True Social account that said that a guy by the name of Siram Krishnan, who is a Indian immigrant, not that it really matters, I mean, I'm just pointing this out because it really escalated, and there were a lot of false accusations made by the tech executives of racism. So I'm pointing out the fact this guy's an Indian immigrant. Um, Leftist, if you look at his political donations, calls himself a libertarian, but there's more evidence to suggest that he's more of a Democrat than a so-called libertarian, which is, really the case for all of these Silicon Valley guys that are trying to rebrand themselves. And, one of the reasons why likes me, and one of the reasons group of my following over the last 2 years since the announcement that President Trump was going to run again is because I do very deep dive opposition research packets on people. And so, I dismantled the Ron DeSantis campaign, and I bring this up because I've been doing this with all of the people that have been nominated. I've been going through all the nomination lists, and I've been looking at all of the appointees. And so I've also been, examining their backgrounds to see really whether or not these people were properly vetted. I do it in my own capacity. I'm not working for President Trump. And, obviously, if, these people are getting appointed and I have a problem with it, doesn't mean that my say or my word is the only thing that's going to stop them from getting appointed. But I think it's important to look at these people's records and to see like who these people are, where did they come from, especially when it comes to these new made up positions of AI czar and crypto czar and AI advisor and, all these positions that the big tech executives are filling, given the fact that we are rapidly advancing as a society and as as a world, technologically speaking. I mean, we are In my opinion, I think that AI and technocratic rule poses the greatest threat, not just to our country and our, democracy, constitutional republic, whatever you want to say. I mean, as a conservative, I'm kind of nauseated by the word democracy. I use the term constitutional republic mostly because, I had to listen to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris say Donald Trump is a threat to democracy every single day. But regardless of whether you're a leftist and you say democracy or you're a conservative and you say constitutional republic, all of these existing forms of government are threatened by the type of government envisioned by the technocratic billionaire class and these oligarchs and big tech who want to silence us and kind of do away with representative democracy because they feel and they truly believe that it's like a failed experiment. And so I ended up posting screen recordings and graphics from previous tweets that were posted by this guy, Siram Kirshanan, talking about how he wanted to, have more immigration and he wanted the H-1B caps to be lifted. And that, of course, is concerning because, people like David Sachs and other people who now are going to be working in the Trump administration want to say things like, well, AI and immigration have nothing to do with each other, while at the same time saying we can't really hire Americans to work in these industries like AI because they're not smart. They're not the best and the brightest. So we have to import people from abroad. And I just found it to be a little interesting that this guy who's been in the country for 10 years and hasn't been a Trump supporter and, from FEC records has been donating to Democrats like Ro Khanna, for example, who voted to impeach President Trump and supported the indictment of President Trump. And as Elon Musk pointed out today, kind of ironically and hypocritically, given the fact that, I was banned for pointing this out, Ro Khanna also voted against deporting illegal aliens who committed child rape.
Mm-hmm.
So this is all I was trying to say to show that people who are going into the Trump administration, a lot of these people don't share our values and they're only in these positions now because of the people they know or how much money they have. And I was highlighting the fact that these views are in direct opposition to the MAGA base and America First immigration policy. And my tweet greatly upset Elon Musk and greatly upset David Sachs and the Palantir crew and all these other people.
One little tweet, that's so impressive.
What'd you say?
One little tweet. That's
yeah. And honestly, compared to some of the stuff I've said before, which, a lot of it could be called like vitriolic. Not that I was, I don't ever go out of my way to try to be malicious, but I do sometimes spice it up a bit to make a point. I mean, I think that provocation is a really effective tool, not just for journalism, but also for activism, especially when you're trying to like really make a point and drive an issue home. And so it was pretty mild compared to some of the other things that I've said. So I'm really shocked that
you touched a nerve, and then
I just felt like it was my regular critique and analysis. And I wasn't thinking that this tweet was going to blow up, but it got like 5 million views and David Sachs responded to it. He was very angry. Elon Musk responded to it. I mean, everybody responded to it. And then
was that the famous, I'm going to go to war on this issue? And
no, but that's what ultimately caused it, because my tweet was the one that I thought everybody was going to be busy with their families and busy with Christmas and Hanukkah, but it ended up becoming like the dominating subject for the holidays because everybody just started talking about it and they went up in arms about this guy. And to drive home the point, when they said, "Oh, David Sachs called me a liar and said that I wasn't telling the truth about Siram Kirshanan being a career leftist." So that's what escalated it more, because I was like, oh, I'm a liar. Okay, well, look at you. You bought your way into MAGA 5 minutes ago. You supported Ron DeSantis and Vivek Ramaswamy. You don't even support Donald Trump. So let me show you how these people are career leftists. So I pulled all the FEC records to show the fact that he donated to Democrats a month before the election. Kamala Harris, Ro Khanna, other people. And that's what set them off. They went ballistic on me. And, it's nothing different than any of the other tweets I've ever posted before. As a political journalist, every single week I post FEC records and they go viral because I do deep dives and I look at the money and I show people these kind of dark donor networks. That's what I'm known for. A lot of people follow me because they I teach people how to examine FEC records. And
But why do you think this H1, H1B visa thing was such a nerve point? Like, what has it revealed about kind of like the structures of?
well, just because it reveals that these people don't actually care about America, like they say, they don't actually care about American workers and they don't care about putting America first because you see that it becomes just a slogan for these people in big tech who don't really embrace it as a movement, which is what I do as a, true believer in the MAGA movement. And so for them, it's like a bumper sticker or just a slogan. If you really care about America first, then you're going to want to put American workers first. And how demoralizing and just how degrading is it to the American people when you say that you're not the best and you're not the brightest and we have to import people to do these jobs because you're not worthy.
Well, there was that crazy Vivek Ramaswamy thing where he talked
Yeah,
about.
and then Vivek Ramaswamy, who's Indian, of course. And I say that because, like, yeah, people have to understand that if you're he's from this country, but his parents are not. And so you have to understand that when I point out the fact that these people are Indian and they're talking in such a derogatory way, um, saying that we have no culture and that Americans only care about being the jocks and the prom queen and that our culture is essentially subpar. You saw Elon Musk call us subtards, and then
Yeah.
Vivek Ramaswamy said our culture is subpar compared to, Southeast Asian culture or Asian culture. Um, it's going to set people off, obviously. It's going to set people off because it's really derogatory and insulting. And you want to be an advisor to the president of the United States, and you are going to be a government official in this made up, kind of, I guess we can say it now, right? I mean, it's kind of like an open secret that Doge is a scam. It's a vanity project. I don't really think anybody takes Doge seriously. I mean, I certainly don't, and I'm a Trump supporter. But you want to have this vanity project called Doge where you're talking about making the government more efficient, when in reality, it has nothing to do with cutting spending. It's all about redirecting spending into the pockets and the wallets of these billionaires in Silicon Valley. And I bring up the fact that, one of the reasons why these guys, they have such a fascination with India is because India has a caste system. So if you're an Indian or you come from an Indian background or that's your culture, then you're going to think it's okay to talk to the American people like they're a bunch of peasants or indentured servitudes. And you're going to think that it's acceptable to have an organization like Doge, where you're telling people who apply, you're not going to get paid and you're also going to be working 80 hours a week. Unless you're independently wealthy and
But
you have
we
nothing
know
better.
we know that Musk, for instance, when he cleaned out Twitter, he kept all the H-1B visa holders because they would have to do whatever he wanted, and work 80 hours a week or whatever he needed them to
Well, I
do.
mean, he just laid off a bunch of American Tesla workers too. There was an article, I'm sure you can pull it up or link to it, but there were a bunch of Tesla workers that were laid off and replaced with H-1B visa workers too. And he would do the same thing with SpaceX if he could, but it's illegal.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why he's trying to get close to President Trump, because I think he wants to try to reform our immigration laws
Well,
so that,
among a number of things he wants to
well,
do.
you can't have, it's called a federal control flow legislation. And so you're not allowed to hire foreigners to work in the aerospace or, sectors of national security, like SpaceX would be. And so those are Americans. But I really do believe that if they said, all right, you can hire a bunch of foreigners, I think he would probably fire all the Americans at SpaceX, in my opinion,
Yeah.
and replace them with a bunch of indentured servants from India who are willing to work for a quarter of the paycheck for 80 hours a week.
Totally. When we talked before, I mentioned that in preparation, I watched some of your Great Replacement video series, and yeah, I mean, I can understand when you see that in 1965 there's like 13%, non-white population here, and now it's like 44% or something. That could raise a lot of concerns for people about what's happening. But I guess from my perspective, and we don't have to go deep into this right now. The issues around wealth inequality and class are actually maybe the more pertinent ones in terms of why it's not working out very well for the mass of Americans. Like in the 50s, I think it was like 91% tax on the wealthiest if they were making more than $200,000 a year, and that was the money that fueled kind of like social programs and why people could own their own homes and all that stuff. I don't know if you've given any thought to that, but we just thought I would mention, because it's interesting. We're not going to get fully into our disagreements today, but it's interesting. Just I felt like I wanted to like point that out. Yeah.
Well, I feel that a lot of the the resources that have been dedicated or allocated for social services are now being used to supplement the invasion of our country. And so, that's why you have a lot of people who are Hispanic and Black in inner cities showing up to their local council meetings and screaming at their representatives because you have things like Section 8 housing or low income affordable housing. And the wait list now has gone from about 1 year to 8 years because of illegal immigrants. And
Yeah.
I had Lynn Patton on my show, who, is a senior advisor to President Trump, who worked in HUD. And she told me that if we were to actually carry out mass deportations, the wait list for the Section 8 housing or the affordable housing would go from 8 years to 1 year.
Mm.
And so I think that we do a disservice to people on both sides of the political aisle and all Americans if we just completely ignore the fact that this money to supplement and pay for illegal aliens who are living in our country and are receiving government assistance now, where does it come from?
Yeah.
It's being scraped off the top of things like programs for veterans. It's being scraped off of our defense budget.
Maybe
It's being
let's do a deeper dive another day. I want to stay a little bit on the Musk and
yeah.
technocracy subject
But
today.
I do think that a lot of overlap exists between the progressive left and the MAGA base. I know that sounds kind of crazy to say, but
Yeah, well, I noticed even Jack Posobiec, is that his name, was bringing up some Bernie Sanders kind of speeches about
yeah.
Bezos situation and so on. So yeah, I mean, I
Yeah,
think
and so it's kind of interesting because I never thought that I would find myself saying Bernie Sanders was right. I never considered myself to be a progressive. I'm not a progressive. I've been a registered Republican my whole life, even though I really don't like the Republican Party. I live in the state of Florida, so I kind of have to be registered Republican. Otherwise, I won't be able to participate in the primary process here. But the Republican Party's a disappointment. I'll never be a Democrat, but I feel like the two-party system is a failed system for sure. But there's a lot of crossover. And now these feelings of class consciousness, for example, which, the right used to mock the left and talk about how, oh, it's just, I remember when I was in college, for example, and all the roommates, when I was going to Mount Holyoke, which was like $70,000 a year, I went to school with a lot of rich kids who, their parents were bankers, and all these students would get in the Peter Pan buses. They have something called the Peter Pan bus line. I'm sure that you're familiar with
I
the
know
Peter
about it.
Pan
Yeah.
bus line. And they would just get all these college kids from all these like rich liberal arts schools in Massachusetts and load them up and take them down to what is it called? Zuccotti Park for Occupy Wall Street. And I used to just kind of mock these people and think to myself, oh, you're just so ridiculous. Percent. But this last week or these last 2 weeks, really, it's just been such an eye-opening experience for me because MAGA is starting to feel it. I almost feel like our voices now are being replaced by this elite class of billionaires, the 1% in Silicon Valley, who want to just have total control over all of our platforms of communication. And so while I used to think it was a very low IQ argument and that it was just for people who didn't really want to celebrate capitalism or people who had animosity towards other people's wealth, I admit that I'm starting to see more overlap now, and I'm starting to also entertain the idea that it's a legitimate grievance. And I think that this is going to be a defining issue on the ballot in 2026,
Mm.
this concept of class consciousness, because a lot of people in MAGA now feel like their voices are being replaced by this elite class of
Yeah.
billionaire technocrats. And
Well,
it's a huge
that
threat.
yeah. I mean,
I
that's
think it's a huge threat to our. I don't think that it makes you a Marxist to admit that, because I'm certainly I mean, they call me far right, right? I get called far right all the time. I'm a nationalist. I'm a conservative. I am certainly not a Marxist, but I do see, a push by this elite class to kind of establish a technological digital caste system here in America.
Yeah. I mean, of course, we saw that also with the kind of outpouring of support that was completely bipartisan to the murder of the United Healthcare CEO, which was kind of like shocking. I mean, Ben Shapiro, if you look at the comments to the speech he made about it, people were like, "What are you talking about, Ben? This is like a terrible system." And it's not that anybody wants anybody to get murdered, but there was a sense of kind of like a surprising amount of coordination in terms of how people felt about it. You know.
Yeah, and I was talking to some friends about this too, and I said that the way that they're trying to idolize Luigi Mangione, and you saw how so many people sympathized with him. It was kind of strange. I think what he did is awful. It's terrible, but at the same time, it was wild to see how many millions of Americans and people sympathized with his actions and are now actually trying to advocate for his release, and they view him as a victim. And so, what does that say for society as a whole, and how is it going to progress as we continue to lose our freedoms because of this kind of elite billionaire class that keeps shafting the American worker? And I think that this was really eye-opening for me. I mean, I always believed that the technocrats were oppressive. I wrote a book about it, and obviously I
Sure.
always thought that, it was always going to get worse. I thought that Donald Trump winning was kind of going to be our saving grace from technocratic rule. But now they're all being welcomed in and they're
Well,
getting a seat at the table. And I do find it to be a bit disturbing. And
a question for you.
I think that it's only going to increase people's awareness of class consciousness. And I think that the way that these technocratic billionaires are silencing people's voices, it's going to inspire acts of violence. I'm not encouraging violence. I'm not a violent person. But I'm reminded of, if you remember, her name was Nassim. I forget which year it was, but there was an Iranian American woman that walked into the headquarters of YouTube in California, and she tried to shoot people, and then she shot herself in the head. I think her name was Nassim Ogdam, if you recall.
No,
And she did it because they demonetized her channel and they, completely silenced her videos. Again, terrible act of violence. I condemn it. I think that, regardless of how much they upset you or how much they try to silence your voice, obviously that's not violence is not the answer, but we've seen people be inspired to carry out acts of violence because their voices have been silenced, and it just makes me wonder if this continues and there's this push to try to silence the American people even more, and centralize all of the wealth within this elite Silicon Valley class. How are the masses going to react? Like, is it going to result in acts of violence and mass chaos in our society? And I'm actually like very worried about it, because I used to only see the radical left talk about this, groups like Antifa, but now I'm actually starting to see people on the right share the same talking points as people on the progressive left.
Laura, do you think there's a sense that the trust between Elon Musk, in particular in the MAGA base, has been irreparably damaged by the way he handled this? I mean, is that because even if he now says,
Yeah,
oh,
I
I
would
made a
say
mistake,
so. I
yeah,
would say so.
because his platform really was kind of like the platform for this whole movement to kind of coalesce over the last couple of years. So, now
Yeah,
people are
I
going to be aware
definitely
that
think so.
he's going to be able to turn up and down or turn off and on whoever he wants. I mean, he even just changed the terms of service to make it even easier for him to do that.
No, I think that the trust has been broken. I've already seen a lot of really big accounts leave, cancel their premium subscriptions. People are starting to boycott now. I think that the trust is broken. I mean, how can you trust the platform and put your eggs in one basket when they do what they did to me? So I still don't have my blue check mark back. And I proved with evidence other accounts that have done the same thing I've done, and nothing ever happened to them. So you're seeing people now talk about how they feel like the algorithms are being manipulated and changed to kind of go along with the fact that Elon's upset.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of
I mean, what he did with you is
like
very
Mao.
strange, right? He's like,
Yeah.
you have some paid subscribers, but they can't subscribe, nor that they can't
Yeah, he
pay.
took away my subscribers, and
Yeah, which was
people feel like they're being
your livelihood in
prevented.
essence. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it is my livelihood. So he took away my livelihood and also the free will of my subscribers to choose who they want to support, significantly reduced my reach. I mean, people are like, oh, I can't see your posts anymore. I don't see any of your tweets anymore. And so that not only impacts my livelihood, but also my reputation as a journalist. And it impacts, my company as a journalist too, because people now aren't going to be able to see my writings or my reports, my videos. And that, of course, is very upsetting to me. It takes a lot of time away and a lot of focus from what I'm trying to do,
yeah.
especially, coming up to the inauguration and the swearing in of all the representatives and the certification on January 6th. Like I had money invested into covering these events and I had a planned production schedule. And now it's very much disrupted because I've lost my blue check. So,
Let's
uh,
let's uh let's zoom out a little bit. I'm just kind of
how do
curious.
people trust building
Yeah.
building?
I'm curious if we zoom out a little bit for a second, just for people, who don't know you so well, who are watching this. What kind of is your political philosophy? I mean, is there some existing state or nation that kind of exemplifies what would be an ideal for you and what would you want to see like here in the US?
No, I'm a nationalist. I mean, look, I'm a supporter of the constitutional republic, but I am very much a nationalist when it comes to immigration. I am not a fan of immigration, legal or illegal. And so for me, I am in favor of an immigration moratorium. Um, and that's really, you know, that's a view that used to be called extreme, but I feel that more Americans feel this way, especially with the rise of migrant crime. Um, I don't have any extreme views. That's why I don't understand the kind of like visceral reaction towards me that so many people have because I view my mindset and I view my political ideology to be quite mainstream. I don't feel that I'm espousing any type of extreme rhetoric or any type of extreme political philosophy. In fact, I think that Elon Musk is the one who's espousing an extreme political philosophy when he talks about, technocracy and colonization of Mars. If you want a technocracy in Mars, then you must think it's an ideal government. And he's already said that he thinks that representative democracy is outdated and he's using his platform to carry out regime change around the world. And he clearly is a subscriber to this, neo-reactionary dark enlightenment philosophy which wants to implement a monarchy. So I guess these people now they want to implement technocratic monarchy. And it's not just some online cult where, you have a bunch of autistic incels sitting around talking about, their own version of a monarchy and it's never going to happen because, they're just sitting in their basement or sitting around talking about something that is quite unrealistic. No, we're talking about the richest man in the world who now has defense contracts, who is on his way to the automotive industry and also has all of these satellites in space. Just today, it was announced that he secured a $1.5 billion with Georgia, with Italy, under Georgia Maloney. So of course, President Trump just had dinner with Georgia Maloney at Mar-a-Lago, so the timing on that's quite interesting. But I bring this up because he then threatened to go to war with everybody that didn't want to support his idea as it relates to the H-1B visas. And so I find that to be kind of extreme, right? Because he actually has the mechanisms, he has the money, and he has the manpower, and he has the weaponry to implement his political philosophy and his political agenda, not just here in the United States of America, but also all around the world, as we're seeing him do. So
Yeah, I mean, one thing
I
that's
find that to be extreme. I don't think that there's anything extreme with me wanting to have an immigration moratorium.
I mean, one thing that seems potentially tragically ironic in a way is that, the MAGA base who were supporting Trump really didn't like globalization and kind of like, yeah, like this idea of technocratic controls, surveillance, and all of that stuff, and restrictions on free speech. But one of Musk's closest allies and also a big supporter of Trump is Larry Ellison, who was the, CEO of Oracle, founder of Oracle. And Ellison has said that, yeah, he wants to institute a kind of AI-based digital surveillance in the US that'll keep everybody, all the citizens on their best behavior. So that sounds to me very similar, like the Chinese social credit system. What's your thoughts about that? I lost you for a second there. Well, I
Oh,
mean,
your connection for a
yeah,
second, I think it's cutting out.
we flared for a second.
Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yeah, I could totally hear you. Yeah, I was talking about Larry Ellison, who's one of Trump's biggest backers and also close with Musk.
Yeah, the social credit score system. So, yeah, he clearly wants to implement a social credit score. So he says he doesn't, but Yesterday, people, including myself, were asking Grok, the AI on Twitter. So, what's my Twitter social credit score? And they were like, "Well, we don't yet have a definitive social credit score like China. We have our own internal system that's a bit unofficial, but also official." Like, what does that mean? It's unofficial, but also official, right? So they're
Hmm.
using a social credit system. So my score was, I think it was 45, and people were getting limited as or listed as 38 out of 100. So 45 out of 100. So yeah, they clearly want to implement some kind of a social credit score system, just like they have WeChat in China, which is like the everything app when your banking and everything is tied into it. Elon has also said that he wants X to be the everything app. He just talked about how he wants there to be X payments and X TV and X dating. And what are they going to do? Are they going to convince the government to make it so that everybody has to have an X account, and then they're going to shut you up, or they're going to like penalize you and take away your ability to use premium features if you criticize the regime? And now it's like, oh, we're going to penalize the algorithm and change the algorithm so you can only talk about positive things. This is straight out of the CCP. This is exactly what Mao Zedong used to do with his propaganda campaign of joy, where you always have to be joyful, and joy is defined by the leader himself. And so it's a way for this concept of joy, which was, promoted by Mao Zedong and the CCP, was used as a tool of control by the CCP, so that you could only say joyful, happy things about the dictator, because the dictator, in that case, Mao Zedong, was the source of all of your happiness. And so the most joyful things that you have in your life are from the dictator. And I honestly feel like Elon feels that way. I feel like he thinks that we ought to get on our knees and thank him for everything, and we have to we have to praise him for everything, and that we have to be grateful for him for everything. And if we don't, then we are spreading negativity. We are disrupting the level of joy. And it's like, didn't we just get done mocking Kamala Harris for this bullshit campaign of joy? I mean, I recall Elon Musk of all people laughing, and everybody on online saying, "Oh, who the fuck does Kamala Harris think she is? Like, some kind of Nazi or some kind of, CCP agent coming out of China talking about this Maoist concept of joy, or this Nazi concept of joy." If
Hmm.
you look at this, if you
Well,
look at
let's.
these
Yeah.
things, and I say this Nazi concept, and I say this Chinese concept of joy, because historically speaking, this is at the center of all those movements: the Nazi movement, the Chinese Communist Party, these concepts of joy, where you constantly have to promote joy and positivity as it is
Yeah.
dictated by the dictator,
Yeah,
whether it be
and
Hitler
we
or
know and we
whether
know
that be
and we
Mao
know
Zedong.
it works. Like, I mean, I saw this woman from North Korea who escaped, and she was saying when she was a young person in North Korea, she completely thought the dictator was God. It never even occurred to her that he wasn't God. So we can indoctrinate and control people's minds. It's well known that that can be done, and we have all the tools to do that right now. I'm curious though.
Yeah,
I
and
wanted
I'm
to.
not I'm not just trying to use those terms either. Like when I'm talking about when I say communist or when I say Nazi, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic or inflammatory. You can go look it up. I mean, there's a lot of people that really haven't studied history and they're not familiar with these things, but these are full-blown propaganda campaigns, and it was literally called Mao's Joy
No,
Propaganda
absolutely.
Campaign.
I'm curious though, because I know you're a huge supporter of Trump, and how do you understand his role in this right now? I mean, do you think he isn't quite aware of Musk's plan or ambition, or he's kind of looking the other way, or he's focusing on something else? I mean, yeah, why wouldn't he be aware of what's happening, or what's his kind of what do you think he's kind of feeling about all of this, or yeah, where's he at?
Well, I think President Trump is grateful to Elon Musk for, the large contribution. Obviously, the Republican Party is grateful because Elon Musk gave almost, what was it, $270 million. So it's a lot of money. And we have always complained on the right about not having our own George Soroses, right? And Elon Musk has called himself the George Soros of the right. He actually proclaimed this from the stage of an event for America First Policy Institute at Mar-a-Lago, and is on video saying that he's the George Soros of the right. So I think that the Republican Party is now a captured party. They are completely bought by, this billionaire. I'm not saying that Donald Trump is bought, but the party itself, is kind of in a paralyzed state. And you saw this with the way that the speakership race just went down. You saw this with the way that the spending bill debate went down, where Elon Musk came in and was like, "Okay, well, I'm here, and if you don't do as I say, I'm going to primary you, and I have unlimited money. I'm like God, and I'm just going to." Come in here and primary everybody that doesn't do what I want. And then we saw, of course, he had direct communication with Mike Johnson, direct communication with Vivek Ramaswamy. They admitted that they're on a group chat together. So they're literally on a group chat. And what was the first thing that we saw out of the spending bill, which we were told was going to reduce spending, which is not what happened actually. He took out all of the regulations on China as it relates to AI. And so now we're putting our country at risk. It's a national security threat. And eventually, President Trump's going to have to come to terms with the fact that a lot of the billionaire leftists in Silicon Valley who are now in his administration cosplaying as Trump supporters, cosplaying as Republicans, or, newfound MAGA supporters. I like to call themselves tech right, whatever the fuck that means. I don't even know what that means. Tech right. I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous because, you're not tech right. You're just an opportunist. Like, let's be honest, okay? I can be grateful for Elon Musk and his financial contribution, but the Democrats and the FCC made it very clear that they were going to come after Elon Musk if Joe Biden won re-election or Kamala Harris, got into the White House. So Elon Musk, in a way, invested $270 million to kill the investigations into himself. So we can say, yes, it's very generous. Thank you so much for the money. But just in the last 2 months alone, since the presidential election, today is what, January 5th? So it's been 2 months now. His combined wealth through all of his companies has increased by another $650 billion. So, and nothing has changed. There hasn't been any new major products rolled out. There hasn't been any significant changes aside from the factor of Elon Musk's proximity to Donald Trump. So these are conflicts. And if it was Joe Biden, Republicans, would be up in arms. And I think that we also need to be very critical of his relationship with the CCP. We can be grateful. We could be respectful. We can say thank you for the money, but at the same time also say, hey, I don't really think it's a good idea for a guy who is kind of controlled by Xi Jinping and Li Qian. And, they could easily shut down his gigafactory in Shanghai if they want to. I just don't really think it's great for this guy to have unfettered access to President Trump. And, maybe it's not so smart to give him a blue pass. And what happens if there's some kind of a listening device? Not saying that he's going to be the one implementing the listening device, but, if the CCP tells you to do something, you kind of have to do it.
So
We've seen that he has access to world leaders. They call him up and they're like, hey, can you, disable Starlink or not give Starlink? What's going to happen when, for example, China decides to invade Taiwan? Is Elon Musk just going to write another $200 million check and tell all the Republicans, if you speak out against China's invasion of Taiwan and you call for Taiwanese independence, or you speak out and condemn the reunification, just, another word for invasion of Taiwan, then we're going to throw tons of money against you and primary you. These are national security issues. And this issue of the H-1B visas and the issue of the censorship is just, the first, in my prediction, of many implosions that are going to happen before the ultimate divorce takes place. And I think that divorce is inevitable.
That's what you're hoping to see, is that divorce.
Yeah, not for malicious reasons, but because I truly am America first. I think there needs to be a divorce. There should be a divorce. The contracts are inappropriate. I don't think any political donor should have that much influence. It's inappropriate. It's called influence peddling. This is something that we're supposed to be, condemning on both sides of the aisle. We call it influence peddling and quid pro quo.
No.
It's not like I have a personal vendetta against Elon Musk. It's that I love my country more than I love access to billionaires. And, I love my country more than I like access to social media. And if you truly care about democracy or your constitutional republic or just elections, the integrity of our elections and the integrity of our political system, you shouldn't want any billionaire. I spoke out about George Soros. I'm speaking out now about Elon Musk. You shouldn't want any of these people interfering in our elections. I think it's wildly inappropriate for people who oversee telecommunications networks and news outlets to be um, throwing this much money at our political leaders. Am I grateful that Donald Trump won? Am I denying the significance of the money that Elon, gave the Republican Party and he gave President Trump? No, I'm grateful, but at the same time,
But I've actually seen you call for the repeal of Proposition 230 from the Telecommunications Act, which for many people is one of the main
yeah,
problems.
Section 230, yeah, which they're clouding the distinction of platform versus publisher, and so they have all these platform protections, but they're behaving like publishers. They're editorializing, and now, especially in the form of Twitter, X, they're trying to editorialize what content is acceptable by saying, what is positive, what's negative. That's very subjective. Like I could post a story about migrant gang rape, like speaking of migrant gang rapes, because Elon Musk is, obsessed with these migrant gang rapes that are taking place right now. And you could say, hey, it's really positive that you're talking about migrant rape gangs because it's raising awareness about the Islamic infiltration of Europe and, the mistreatment of underage girls who are being raped by immigrants. Or you could say, hey, it's very negative that you're talking about the gang rapes by Islamic immigrants of underage girls because it's very disturbing content. And, it's really horrific that little girls are being raped by Muslims. And this is really sad to imagine. It's very graphic content. So, who gets to determine what is positive and what's negative? Like, depending on who you ask, like it could be positive or it could be negative. I'm not talking about like the act of Islamic gang rapes and, raping underage girls. It's obviously negative, but the coverage itself, the content itself. So I have a problem with it, especially as a journalist, because, who's supposed to report on negative things now? Like criticism of your politicians and your representatives could, be considered positive. Hey, I love the fact that Laura Loomer or Daniel, I love the fact that you're holding this politician or this oligarch accountable. It's really amazing that you're, speaking truth to power. Or, hey, it's really bad that you're speaking out against the richest man in the world. Or, it's really bad that you're criticizing this elected official because it's not nice to say mean things about politicians. Again, who gets to decide like whether this is a positive interaction or it's a negative interaction? I just find it to be very Orwellian, draconian,
Mm.
and also it's very Maoist. It is,
You
right? I mean, I
brought up,
think that regardless of your political ideology, like this is straight out of Mao's playbook.
you brought up the term dark enlightenment before, and maybe not everybody watching this knows what that is. How did you learn about that? How do you understand it? Why do you think it's not more known about, or why isn't it part of like the political discussion? Yeah,
So
what do you, what,
I came to find out about dark enlightenment and neo-reactionary theory really in about 2016, I'd say 2015, 16. I used to go to a lot of these MAGA meetups, and we used to call them, alt-right meetups. And at first, alt-right was supposed to be, this new, before it got co-opted by people that were doing Roman salutes and, shouting Hail Hitler. It was really supposed to be this like new right-wing movement that wasn't really beholden to the Republican Party, but we had, I guess you could say, like more modernized views of what it meant to be a right winger. And so they used to have these alt-right meetups, and that's when I first really became familiar with it, right? And a lot of these people, these guys, and some women, mostly men who I met in the alt-right, subscribe to this concept. But then the alt-right kind of, became something else, especially after Charlottesville. And you couldn't really call yourself alt-right anymore because they started to say that everybody who was in the alt-right movement was a neo-Nazi or some kind of a white supremacist. But before Charlottesville happened, the alt-right was considered to be like this very mild movement. And now it was called the new right, right? Like instead of alt right, they called themselves the new right, and then they had like the dueling the dueling events in Washington, D.C., like the alt-right protests and the new right meetup. But that's really when I first started to kind of become familiar with the figures in Dark Enlightenment and this philosophy, because a lot of the people who I met in the so-called alt-right and the new right subscribed to it, and they read Curtis Yarvin and Nick Land and obviously I myself am not a believer in this philosophy or these political ideas, but
How would you how would you how would you sorry
I used
how
to
would
go
you
to a lot of these meetups.
how would you characterize the political philosophy or the political ideas there?
Well, it's anti-democracy. It wants
Mm.
to do away with the representative democracy. It wants to do away with our current form of government. It views our constitutional republic or democracy, right? However you want to say it. I mean, it's not the same thing, but they view our current system of government, this concept of a representative democracy, as being failed and outdated and needing to be replaced. And they envision our country as needing to be run like a monarchy. So they want to
Or like a
have
tech company Arvin talks about.
like a tech company,
Yeah.
yes, where the CEO of this company, so the head of our, head of our country, is kind of like an elitist corporate monarch, right? So the CEO of the monarchy, their ideal person to become this monarch of the United States of America or the globe, the monarch of this company, the United States of America, because they envision our country as being operated like a corporation, would be Elon Musk. And they've said so publicly. They've made these statements. They've said that Elon Musk is the ideal monarch. And this isn't some fringe philosophy. So JD Vance, who's now vice president, has entertained this neo-reactionary dark enlightenment theory. It's funded by Peter Thiel, who, of course, was very involved in the Trump administration in the first term, is a funder of, well, he's alleged to be a funder of people like Curtis Yarvin and Nick Land. It has an influence. It has an influence on people like Elon Musk and, his baby mama Grimes and
Yeah.
a lot of people who
And
are associated
it's
with and
yeah,
affiliated with
yeah.
Elon Musk.
It's kind of connected also to these ideas around transhumanism and effective
Yeah,
accelerationism and the
yeah.
singularity. I mean,
A lot of people who support this transhumanist movement, and a lot of the people who believe in this kind of AI technocratic takeover of our country, and also a lot of the people who subscribe to the idea that we need to colonize Mars, like that whole following, right? That whole group of people that support colonizing Mars. I'd say that they all subscribe, for the most part, to this dark enlightenment theory.
Do you think maybe Musk has said, "Listen, Trump, if you fully support me, I'm going to try to get you eternal life. Like I'll, we'll have artificial superintelligence and transhumanism. We'll build new bodies. We'll live forever. In our Martian paradise. You think that's the bargain here? Maybe.
I have no idea, honestly. I mean, I don't want to speak for Trump. I don't know. I haven't been a part of those conversations, but
One more question for you. I'm really
I mean,
enjoying.
it
Yeah,
certainly wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I just think that
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if Elon has had conversations about transhumanism with Trump, but I don't know. I don't want to speculate. I don't want to spread rumors. I don't know.
yeah.
I really
I,
don't know what he has enticed President Trump with, aside from, a big fat check.
yeah. Listen, I really want to thank you also for making the time to talk today. And if people are still listening at this point in the conversation, please subscribe, like the channel, and all of that good stuff. I do want to ask you maybe one last question, maybe two, but I'm curious also. I mean, in the book, you talk about kind of, or maybe other places I've heard you talk about being a free speech absolutist. And I'm curious about that. I mean, is that, yeah, what does that mean to be a free speech absolutist? I mean, do you think there are any points where free speech oversteps or needs to be reined in a little bit, or how do you see
So
that in
I think that all speech should be allowed. I think that all speech should be monetized, except when you are advocating for political violence or you are promoting terrorism. So that's where I draw the line. It's very simple. And so I don't think that they should even have terms of services. I think that terms of services are just there to be abused and manipulated. I don't think that terms of services should exist. I think that, you know, your speech should be allowed and you should be able to say whatever you want. It doesn't matter how, obscene it is, how racist it is, how inflammatory it is. I don't really care. I get called a kike every single day by people in my comments. I don't care. I will still fight for their right to have free speech. I don't care if you're a Holocaust denier. I mean, obviously it bothers me because, I'm Jewish and obviously the Holocaust did happen. But I'm saying I don't care if you're a Holocaust denier, whether you know, are I don't know, whatever you want to be, right? I'm
Mm.
thinking of like the most extreme speech, right? The most extreme thing I can think about are these people who are Holocaust deniers. Speech is not there to be speech that you like. It's the First Amendment is there not to protect speech that you like and speech that makes you comfortable. It's speech that makes you uncomfortable. And so you should be fighting for the Nazis and the white supremacists and the Holocaust deniers and the fringe people like the Westboro Baptist Church types to have their freedom of speech because, it's a slippery slope. If you say that these people are not allowed to have a voice or they can't be monetized, then what's going to happen when somebody then says that you're too fringe or your voice is too extreme, right? So, unless you are explicitly calling for political violence, encouraging people to be murdered, inciting riots, or again, aiding and abetting terrorist movements, then I think you should be allowed to do whatever you want on social media and say whatever you want. The mute and block button exists for a reason. I don't know why people act so sensitive, like they can't just press a mute or block button.
Yeah. And I guess your perspective would be that, but in a sense that, should there be a government kind of like effort to just, institute that these kind of programs, now that they've become these platforms, now they've become of such universal power and value, should remain open? Or
Yeah,
how
they
does
should
that?
be they should be regulated like utilities.
Hmm, interesting. I
I mean,
love it.
they're
Go ahead.
saying that they are the media now. So if you're the
Mm,
media and you're the everything app, everything is everything. What is everything?
yeah.
What is the definition of everything?
Yeah. I appreciate that. Well,
So if
thank
you
you, Laura.
deny
Yeah.
somebody everything, aren't you denying them then a service that they need? Right? If everything is going to be constituted on one app, then you have to treat it like a utility. So you wouldn't just be able to shut somebody's water or their electricity off, right? So why should
Right.
you be able to shut their access to everything off? So that's how they're branding themselves.
Right.
I mean, Elon Musk is saying that he wants it to be the everything app. So if it's everything, you can't ban somebody from everything.
Right. Well,
And
and
if
that,
you're going to be and if you're going to make something everything, then you have to be regulated like a utility.
yeah. And how are you
Just
feeling
like
now?
just like utilities are regulated, right? Like water,
Yeah.
something that everybody needs, right? Electricity, something that everybody needs. So you can't just say, "Oh, you have a poor social credit system or you pissed off the emperor today, so we're going to shut your access off," especially if you are promoting yourself and creating your platform to exist as a utility.
Totally. Very interesting perspective. I'm curious. So you're going to go to the inauguration on the 20th. How are you feeling now about the inauguration and the whole situation now?
Yeah, I'm going to go to the inauguration. I'm excited. I'm excited to see President Trump. I mean, look, I worked extremely hard to help President Trump get elected. And so I'm a bit bummed out. I've been feeling kind of, down and depressed these last few days because I feel like Elon Musk has kind of like just sucked up all the energy and sucked up all the joy, right? It used to be a meme when we'd say, oh, the joy is gone, but really the joy is gone. And so many of us were so excited to like have a new year. And I honestly, I just like, I went to bed early. I saw those images of Elon Musk and President Trump at Mar-a-Lago, and it just pissed me off so much that I just went to bed early because
Mm,
I was so pissed off that the MAGA base had just been called a bunch of retards and were told to go F themselves in the face. And I went to bed without even watching the clock turn midnight. I didn't even stay up to watch fireworks because I was just so kind of deflated by it. Like it just felt like a betrayal to the base. So I'm trying to have this delicate balance of holding people accountable and also, speaking out and advocating for free speech and also at the same time being grateful that he purchased X. But I also thought that X was going to truly remain a free speech platform. And this whole idea of, oh, freedom of speech is not freedom of reach. Actually, it is. It is. So reach is speech. And even the FEC has determined this, right? Because they've said that monetization is speech. So how can you say that that speech isn't, or reach isn't speech, or speech isn't reach, to cut off somebody's monetization and their money when our own government has said that money is speech. Isn't that the argument that was made in order to completely eradicate campaign finance laws and to cut the caps on campaign finance? They said that money is your First Amendment right. Money is speech, right? I mean, that's what they said.
Yeah.
So I don't understand how Elon Musk can then turn around and say that, freedom of speech is not freedom of reach.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I'm a bit upset that my livelihood has been taken away, and that people are being silenced. And I worked really hard to build my following of 1.4 million people organically. I didn't use bots. I didn't pay for any advertising. So we'll see what happens. But I still support President Trump, but it will be really interesting to see what happens during the nomination process. And, I want to even know if some of these technocrats are going to be able to pass an FBI background check. Some of these people like David Sachs, it'll be really interesting to see whether they'll even be able to pass an FBI background check to go work in the administration. So I guess we'll find out in about 15 days. We'll see what happens. But it's definitely very concerning to me. I don't know how the Republicans expect to win the House or keep the House in 2026 if all of their biggest fighters and people like me are completely silenced online. I don't really understand the strategy, but
Yeah.
I suppose we'll find out.
Cool. Well, Laura, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me. I really appreciated the dialogue, and I love the alligator head behind you.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, look forward
Yeah, and
to more
that's my
chats.
book behind me too. So
Yeah.
if people want to read it, it's called Loomered, How I Became the Most Banned Woman in the World. And you can get it online on my website. I sell signed copies. And then additionally, I've been encouraging people to just subscribe to me on Substack. So lauraloomer.substack.com if you want to support my work. I mean, I know that's how a lot of your audience is primarily leftist, but, I am doing a lot to speak out against the technocrats and the oligarchs in Silicon Valley if you do want to support that work.
Yeah.
But you can also catch my show every Tuesday and Thursday on Rumble, rumble.com/Laura Loomer. It's called Loomer Unleashed.
I think a lot of people who follow my work will be very interested in this conversation, to be honest. Okay, well, thank you so much, and I look forward to the next one.
Yeah,
So,
thanks for having me.
ciao, ciao.